put the pressure on your defense.
Paul George went from underrated or hated to needs to be traded in a matter of 3 seasons. But how did all this happen? Thanks to BetUS for sponsoring today's video, but before we get into what really went wrong, let's talk about his climb to the top. The year is 2010. Paul George was just drafted by the Indiana Pacers, and he was selected as the 10th overall pick in the first round. With his insane speed, vertical, smooth handle, and silky shot, it didn't take long for Paul George to establish himself as one of the coldest players in the entire league. He was able to score at all 3 levels while also being great on defense. He was a matchup nightmare for most teams and was highly regarded as one of the best two-way players in the entire NBA. By 2013, Paul George was already leading the Indiana Pacers to deep playoff runs. He was able to challenge that dynasty Miami Heat team that had LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. This play where he gets past LeBron James and dunks on his teammates is one of the many plays that made me realize that PG was that guy. He became the face of a small market franchise and put Indiana on the map. His rise to the top seemed inevitable. The following year in 2014, Paul George suffered a tough leg injury that scared a lot of viewers. The man's leg was literally gone, but some way, somehow, Paul George came back like he never left in the 2015-2016 season. He played a career-high 81 games, had a career-high 23 points per game, a career-high 7 rebounds per game, and tied his career-high in steals and assists with 1.9 and 4.1 per game. I wasn't going to show the injury, but you have to see it to realize just how insane this return was. But I'm warning you, this is a very tough watch. Despite having career highs across the board in 2016, Paul George was traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder the following season in the summer of 2017. This trade was one of the most pivotal moments of his entire career. After playing for the Indiana Pacers for 7 seasons, PG was traded for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. Paul George arrived in OKC as the perfect guy to complement Russell Westbrook's game, especially considering the fact that Russell Westbrook just came off an MVP season. A lot of people doubted that 2 ball-dominant players can coexist, but little did they know that Paul George and Russell Westbrook proved them to be very wrong. Paul George please show it, the chemistry between the 2 stars was undeniable. The next season, Paul George came back with a vengeance and had another career year, but this time it was in another city with another team, and he had more help than he did before. Paul George jumped up from 21 points a game to 28 points a game, shooting around 44% from the field, 8 rebounds a game, and 4 assists, while having another dominant defensive season, averaging over 2 steals a game. The jump in his stats was worthy of a Most Improved Player award. He led the Oklahoma City Thunder to the 6th seed, and they were 1 win away from 50. Paul George placed 3rd in the MVP race that year. So yeah, Paul George put himself in elite company. This time around, PG and Westbrook ran into another elite guard, Damian Lillard. I think by now we all know how this went. Where exactly was this playoff P persona that we had been hearing about from Paul George?
Y'all ain't met playoff P yet, huh?
Things would only go downhill from here. After Paul George and the Thunder got hit with that insane game-winning shot from Dame time, PG had a very salty quote and called that shot a bad shot. I get that he was feeling down after a huge loss, but you've got to give credit where credit is due, PG.
Don't care what anybody says, that's a bad shot. But hey, he made it. That story won't be told that it was a bad shot.
After another first-round exit, Paul George decided it was time for a change. This change would end up being a massive one as he went to the front office of Oklahoma and requested a trade. PG wanted to be traded to the Los Angeles Clippers so he could join superstar Kawhi Leonard, who had just won a championship the year before in Toronto. The Thunder agreed to this trade request and sold out a deal immediately. Paul George was officially traded to the Los Angeles Clippers on June 10th of 2019. Before we get more in depth about the Clippers situation, let's talk about BetUS, because you could go on their website and bet on the Sixers to either win over 39.5 wins or under 39.5 wins. This team isn't looking too crazy so far, so I'm gonna go ahead and take the under. And if you guys want to place bets like these too, BetUS is offering a 150% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 with code YouTube150. But anyways, back to the video. This was one of the biggest trades in NBA history, considering how much the Los Angeles Clippers gave up to get George. They gave up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, and multiple first-round picks. Looking back, this might be one of the most one-sided trades of all time, especially when you realize that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is now an MVP caliber player and he gets the benefit from all of those first-round picks that the Oklahoma City Thunder have. But we can get to Shai in another video. Paul George only played 48 games in the first season with the Clippers, but they managed to make the playoffs regardless and finished as the second seed in the Western Conference, just 3 games behind the Lakers. Paul George even managed to get out of the first round for the first time in over 3 years after the Clippers beat an up-and-coming superstar Luka Doncic. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were looking great in the bubble and even managed to take a demanding 3-1 lead in the series over the Denver Nuggets. But then, they absolutely crumbled and lost the next 3 games. This put a major dent in Paul George's legacy, and this only fueled the haters. All of the clowning and slander truly started escalating around this time. I mean, look at this clip. This was not the same Paul George and Kawhi Leonard that we had seen dominate their way through the conference. The Clippers blew a 3-1 lead and were sent to Cancun, as the fans were putting it. Even Damian Lillard had to get in on the action. The next season in 2021, the Clippers managed to get to the 4th seed in the Western Conference and then make it to the Western Conference Finals. They managed to send Luka Doncic home again, then sent home the Utah Jazz, which broke up Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard then ran into a very well-coached Phoenix Suns team that was led by Devin Booker and Chris Paul. The problem was, it was actually only Paul George and the other guys because Kawhi Leonard tore his ACL in Game 4 of the Utah Jazz series. Paul George stepped up in a big way with his co-star Kawhi Leonard out. He came through in the clutch several times and even erupted for 41 points in Game 5 of the series. Paul George's efforts weren't enough as the Clippers would go on to lose the series in 6 games. But this was a good run from the Clippers team, and it looked like they would come back even better the next season with Kawhi Leonard actually playing. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard had 2 very big problems that went hand in hand. The first one was that they weren't getting any younger, and the second one was that their bodies were feeling that age hit them as they were almost always injured. Paul George had played for the Los Angeles Clippers for 5 seasons and only managed to play over 60 games one time, and it was in his final season where the Clippers weren't the contenders they once were before. Injuries happened, but for a guy like Paul George, who heavily relies on his athleticism, there was a noticeable difference in the way he was moving. He was nowhere near the level he used to be defensively and lost a step offensively. Kawhi and PG being in and out of the lineup made it really difficult to build good chemistry amongst not only themselves, but amongst other guys as well. It's not just the physical struggles with George either. He's playing in a time where social media is as big as it ever was, and the fans are highly critical of every single thing that you do both on and off the court. The confidence he used to have was just not the same. In 2022, the Clippers clawed their way to the play-in tournament with Kawhi Leonard missing the entire season and Paul George only playing 31 games himself. When I say clawed, that is not an exaggeration. The Clippers had barely made it, sitting at the 8th seed in the conference. Paul George actually returned late in the season to help the Clippers win their first playing game versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Unfortunately for Clippers fans, Paul George was ruled out for the next game due to health and safety protocols, so the Clips lost to the Pelicans and were sent home once again. They didn't even make the playoffs this time around. Hopes were high as they entered the next season somewhat healthy. They managed to make the playoffs this time around, but Paul George was sidelined for the entire series due to a knee injury that happened late in the season. Kawhi Leonard started strong by taking Game 1 away from the Suns, but he also suffered a knee injury during that series, and the Clippers would eventually lose again. Now we're back to present day, and Paul George is now on the Philadelphia 76ers with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. The Philadelphia 76ers got off to a rough start to the season, with both Joel Embiid and Paul George missing a good amount of games, but they recently just beat the Celtics on Christmas Day. So maybe there's hope for this team. What do you think about Paul George and his horrible luck with these injuries? Do you think we'll ever see what Paul George meant when he originally mentioned playoff P? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video, and I'll catch you legends in the next one.